He wrote the letter, left it on the door, and hurried back, almost getting himself hit by the car on the road. He ran until far away from home and stopped in a bewildering area. He gathered his thoughts and pondered over what had just happened to him. That morning, Oliver accidentally saw his father in a mart, and one look at his old wrinkled face destroyed all his strong strings. That older man in front of him wasn't supposed to look that old, but the worries, tension, stress, depression, and anxiety he had given to him were enough to make him look that old. He followed him to the door secretly and saw his mother at the door as well. His small house was the same as he had left 1 year before, but the people living there were utterly changed. The smile had left their eyes entirely, and they were merely living life without any happiness and hope. Once they both went inside and the door closed, Oliver's heart dropped. He felt the door also close his light and hope for life. Something rattled his heart and gave him the courage to do something he never thought he could. That's when he wrote a letter and left it outside the door. It was the darkest night of the year, or at least that's what Oliver felt, because this night all he desired was light. But was he worthy of having light? Oliver Benjamin, a 17-year-old, intelligent, lean boy, was standing right next to the cliff, throwing stones into the water. Every rock he was throwing in the water made the sound of a slight splash and nothing. In the dark, his senses were depressed with every passing second, and his whole life was dissolving into nothingness right in front of his inner eyes. All those significant and minor ill-doings and his misdemeanors were swirling in his mind like a typhoon. He closed his eyes and left himself on the shore of painful memories. The image of himself when he was 13 clicked in his mind when he shouted at his parents and even broke things at home. He remembered how his mother was so scared of him when he called. She cried that night because of him, but he paid no heed, like it was no big deal. Little did he know how much a big deal it was. All those tears were still fresh in his memory and were pouring on his heart like acid. The memory of 15, when he first spent the night outside and lied to his parents about smoking. He could still smell that smoke, and it was suffocating him to the point of death. How wrong he was to think that he was a person of a strong mind. He can't get addicted so quickly, but no, he was so weak enough to be destroyed with one single blow. Why? Why didn't he listen to his father then? Why did he have to experience the shame, embarrassment, and cruelty of society? Why? How can he face his parents now? All these thoughts made him tear up and fall to his knees. It's been a year since he had left home, and what he had been doing since then, nothing. Nothing. What he was and what he had become. What he had done to himself. What had he done to his parents? He knew his father suffered from cardiac arrest, yet he never returned. He never even bothered to understand how he was, if he recovered or not. Was that enough to know that he was alive? When did he become so cruel? He was supposed to be the arm and shield of his parents. Then why did he become a source of utter shame and chronic disease for them like that? Will they accept me again? He questioned himself, and a shouting answer was no, because all he had done in these past years was absolute wickedness. No matter how much my parents love me, they won't accept me back. I am sure they must have learned to move on without me. The thought shattered his soul, and for a moment he thought of jumping on the cliff and ending his pathetic life. But then he remembered the letter he had left earlier at the door of his parents. He got down from the cliff and started walking on the beach. Should I go or not? He was confused as to what to do. It wouldn't matter if I won't. It's not as if they were waiting for me. He looked at the far horizon of the sea, which was dissolving into the dark sky. Even the moonlight was unwilling to come out tonight. But then, what if they were waiting for me with the light on? A thought crossed his mind, and his heart filled with unsaid thousand emotions. He shook his head. No, I shouldn't have high hopes, and only look at what I have done. The pessimistic side dominated again. He put his hands inside the pocket, and a few notes came out, enough for the cab fare home. But it was the money he begged. That's how he had fallen in past years. What would his parents say when they learned about his ways of living? I will embarrass them more. It's better not to go. Wouldn't it be even crueler not to go? His mind had a mega war between being accepted and rejected. His mind was telling how pathetic he was, and common sense was that his parents would leave him, but his heart was saying that no matter how low he fell, his parents would always love him no matter what, and they would accept him without complaint. With all the thoughts running, he hired a cab and headed home. His pain was turning into agony as he was nearing his home. The taxi passed the street and moved from under a bridge, the last stop before his house. He recalled his mom's and dad's sad faces and thought they could never light up the torch because he had done enough to hurt them. Finally, he reached, and the cab came to a halt. His eyes are closed, and his heart is beating so rapidly. He opened his eyes slowly and saw the place was entirely dark. No lights were on. He wasn't forgiven. He wasn't breathing. He felt that his life was ending. But then he observed a silhouette through the window. His parents came out of the shadows. He thought they didn't want him to be at home and were coming to ask him to leave. But then his dad smiled. Her mom hugged his dad while weeping. He didn't understand what was happening. Were they laughing at him? Were they laughing at his fate? But then his dad clapped 2 times with his hands and looked towards the house. The torch's light turned on. An unstoppable stream of tears started falling from Oliver's eyes. He left the cab and looked at the lights in weird bewilderment. Son, when I saw your letter, I couldn't believe it. But when I saw your feet on the ground in front of me, I can't explain how I felt, Mr. Benjamin said between smiles and tears. Oliver couldn't utter a single word. All he did was stand stiff in one place and look at his fate. Was he worthy of forgiveness? You asked me to light up the torch, but when you decided to come home, and if it helps you, I thought I should light up the neighborhood. Mr. Benjamin explained further. While saying these words, he clapped his hands, and all the lights around their house started to turn on. Torches, street lights, car lights, every possible morning was on that evening. The light of his life returned, and he was forgiven. He hugged his parents at once and cried like a small child. His parents hugged and kissed him back like they never hated him ever. At that moment, Oliver realized, indeed, it's never late to apologize and forgive.
I repeat once again, Miss Logan has looked around the class. It's not even a misdemeanor, it's a crime. Stealing money from a teacher is a disgrace to the whole school. We'll have to search every student. Mr. Andrews, the head of security, walked up to the first desk, and the students dutifully took out their bags. And you look at the cow. Well, Stone has a shorter, a voice from the bottom desks. She is poor and starving. She needs money. The spotted girl took the money, I'm telling you. When Andrews came to Emma, she also calmly put her battered backpack because she had nothing to fear and was used to insults. The man opened the bag, groped for a moment with his hand, and suddenly cried out. He pulled out his hand, in which he was clutching the purse. "It's not yours. It belongs to Miss Logan. Cheeky, you think you're stealing from my school? Well, I'm going to give you a hard time right now." The guard hung over a girl who didn't understand. "It's not mine, and I didn't take anything. It's a mistake, a mistake." Emma trembled. She didn't take that wallet. How it could have happened, she didn't understand. "There's our thief! Shame on you! Thief! Come here, thief!" the teacher almost screamed. Poor Emma didn't understand anything. She dutifully approached Miss Logan, who wouldn't stop screaming. And when the girl looked at her classmates, she saw that several girls were almost laughing. They had bullied her before, but that was the last straw. They framed her, and she would never prove anything. These girls purposely stole money from the teacher and planted on her to shame and humiliate her. It was the end. Emma didn't understand why she was so hated. She just stood there, swallowing tears, thinking about how she wanted to disappear so that no one would ever hurt her or yell at her again. And these girls were pointing their fingers at her and laughing. Emma Stone got used to humiliation and challenging life. The girl's mother died when the baby was not even 5 years old, and her father left the family earlier. The girl was raised by her grandmother, who was always ill. Money was always scarce, and Emma was accustomed to poverty and constant criticism and humiliation from others. Older girls always beat her and called her names for her clothes. She lived on the outskirts of town in a small house that didn't even have proper water. Emma always dreamed of breaking out of poverty and buying herself and Grandma the best. She suffered from childhood from a rare disease, vitiligo. Emma's dark body was covered with bright spots of various shapes and sizes. Only her pretty face was untouched. Big, kind eyes, beautiful features. For some reason, nobody noticed it. Everyone saw only skimpy clothes and hateful spots. The girl tried to wear closed clothes, even in the heat, but it did not help her. Her classmates constantly bullied her and called her names. They only called her Cow, and no one called Emma by name. The school's teachers turned a blind eye to all the injustices, and the old grandmother couldn't do anything. She cried in the evenings, seeing the suffering of her beloved granddaughter. The girl often dreamed that her wealthy and successful father would appear one day and take them out of poverty. But Dad didn't show up. Her grandmother was finding it increasingly difficult to maintain them financially, and she was often sick. Emma struggled to help her grandmother, and she took a part-time job. The money theft at school was the last straw, and Grandma moved Emma to another school. The school children met the girl better there, but she also did not want to communicate with anyone. The teenagers avoided Emma because she was not like them. The girl accepted that no one wanted to communicate with her and be friends with her, and she became even more isolated. She wanted to leave this city. And then another new girl appeared in the class. Rita, the red-haired chatterbox, quickly won everyone's love. She was friendly and outgoing, and the main thing is, for some reason, she decided she had to help the quiet Emma in everything. It was like Rita had never seen Emma's poverty or stranglehold. She was okay with her. The girl gave her beautiful clothes, made her get a fancy haircut, and did not hide her body under robes. Rita first told Emma about her beauty and offered to go to one of the modeling agencies to try her hand. Emma refused for a long time because she didn't believe in herself or her abilities. But after high school, the girls finally decided to leave their little town. Rita went to college, and Emma decided to work part-time and then go to college. The friends promised to call each other every day. Emma got a job in a small flower shop. She still dreamed of a successful future and a promising career. Rita got the girl to believe in herself. Life was running smoothly until another customer came into the store one day. The man picked out the flowers for a long time, but then he went to Emma and talked to her. He said his name was Mr. Porter, and he owned a modeling agency in New York City, and he was just impressed by her appearance. He said he was willing to sign her right there because he saw a lot of potentials and work for her. And her peculiarity, the girl was wearing a t-shirt and there were spots on her hands, would become her chip. Just imagine, dear, the man smiled sweetly to the girl, all the world podiums will be conquered. You are so beautiful. Contracts will fall on you. You will become rich and will not sit in this God-forsaken place. Such a face should see the whole world. Emma was surprised. She didn't know what to do. She said she needed to consult with her friend, but Mr. Porter was insistent and said that the time to agree was now. The girl asked for a chance to think for at least a few days. She understood that this could be her opportunity, because Rita always talked about her place in modeling with such a beautiful face and figure. She called her friend. Rita freaked out and asked Emma not to go anywhere because the man could be a con artist. But Emma already believed him and had a chance to change her life. Rita begged the girl not to do anything stupid, but Emma just hung up. She made her own decision for the first time, and she was very proud of it. She was a little embarrassed in front of her friend, but the girl decided to make it up to her later when wealth and success became apparent. And then she agreed to go with this man, although she did not know him. She believed that the new world of the big city could give her wealth and glory. She wanted to make her grandmother's life happy and carefree. When they came to New York, he put a girl up in a small apartment on the outskirts of town and sometimes took her to some weird auditions. Then, Mr. Porter started talking about how she needed money to do a good job and had to borrow it from someone. Then he said the apartment had to be paid for, and she would have to do questionable advertising. Porter was rude to her. He could be gone for days, leaving the poor girl practically without food. She had no one to turn to, so he took her phone away. Emma was afraid of a man. He could intimidate and crush them psychologically. Emma realized the man had deceived her and taken advantage of her naivety. The girl worked hard, but hardly saw the money she earned. Mr. Porter kept reminding her they had a contract that gave him most of the profits. Emma signed it there in her little town. She didn't read the papers, trusting Porter's words. The girl had to take any job. Porter was in control and wouldn't let Emma keep the money. He began to humiliate and intimidate her. And Porter started drinking and getting handsy. Emma was on the verge of desperation. The last straw was that he wouldn't let her go to Grandma. The girl called about the house neighbors and found that Grandma was very ill, but Porter forbade her to go, again recalling the contract. It helped the girl in this situation that the same day the hateful man was hit by a car. Porter got drunk and crossed the road in the wrong place. The universe took pity on the poor girl. Their home number was clogged in his cell phone as an emergency, so Emma discovered that Porter was in a coma. She came to the hospital, where she guessed the man was her uncle. The nurse gave him his belongings, including a purse with money. The girl took them without hesitation and went to her grandmother's. She was with Grandma for a couple of days, then died quietly in her sleep. The girl was inconsolable. She blamed herself for everything and didn't know how to go on. She had nowhere to go but to stay in their poor house. She didn't even know who owned that apartment in New York and didn't want to go back there. And then she got a call from her cell phone, which they gave away along with Porter's things. "Hello, Emma," Rita's quiet voice sounded. "I know about your grandmother. I'm so sorry. Why didn't you call me? Because I could help you. Where have you gone? I was so looking forward to your call. I'll come tomorrow and we will discuss and decide." Rita came. She helped organize the funeral, and then Emma told her about all her misadventures. Rita was shocked. She blamed herself for not being able to hold Emma. The girls cried for a long time in a hug. Both knew that the two would be easier for them. The girls returned to New York to Emma's apartment. When the girl turned on the answering machine on her phone, she heard that Porter had died. Emma was ashamed, but she felt relieved. Now she was free. Leaving this little apartment, Emma looked at herself in the hall mirror. Her face was slipping, and the spots were more visible against a background of stress, but there was hope for the best in her eyes. The girl promised herself that now she would start a new happy life for her and Grandma. It's been a couple of months. Rita introduced the girl to one of the scouts of a famous modeling agency. He was delighted with Emma's appearance and immediately offered her an entire 5-year contract. This work was not like the one she had to do before. Beautiful places and professional photographers' trips worldwide. Couturier adored Emma's texture, and the offers came in. Emma was incredibly popular, and she had her TV show where she helped young models become successful. She loved this class, And then she published a book about her hard life and became a world bestseller. Emma didn't believe any of this was happening to her. That girl in the rags can now afford to buy anything from a fancy and expensive boutique. Wealth hasn't spoiled her. She was just as humble and kind and wanted to help many people. Emma knew how hard it could be to have no one to help you. She also made Rita her assistant. She often remembered her grandmother and wished she had seen such success. The girl wanted to give as much happiness as possible to those who needed it. She opened several schools for poor children, did a lot of charity work, and helped people with the same disease as her. One day, Emma's agent told her that a fashion magazine wanted to interview her. Emma was sitting in her dressing room when the blonde woman entered the room. Emma thought she looked familiar, but couldn't figure out where they might have met. And when the journalist asked what the secret of her success was, Emma said with a smile, "You know, I have spots on my body, and I'm not ashamed of them. It is much worse when a person has a stain on his soul from what he does to others, and he is not ashamed. Be honest. Do not hurt others. Be beautiful not only outside, let the beauty come from within. I love this world, even if it is hard and painful. That's when you are guaranteed to succeed. Then the universe will give you happiness." The journalist looked away and whispered, "Forgive me. Forgive us all." It turns out that one of the girls once framed poor Emma by planting her teacher's wallet. And now the girl was very ashamed and realized they could have ruined poor Emma's life for good. And Emma forgave them. After so many trials, she didn't become evil and treacherous. She just wanted happiness and peace for everyone. Her life was sad since childhood. She was born into a large family, fifth child. Her father was a heavy drinker. Her mother was always busy with her affairs or other children. She was very lonely. She felt no one needed her. The grief happened when Mary was 6 years old. Her father died. The times began terribly. They didn't have enough money all the time, but they had good people who brought food and clothes. Her mother fell into depression when Mary's father died. Mom's tantrums happened quite often, as well as nervous breakdowns. Her mother took her anger out on the children. She yelled at them constantly, sometimes even beat them. Her mother didn't love Mary and got hurt a lot, but she was the smallest and couldn't defend herself. She was punished for every wrongdoing. Mary was troubled with her mother for the bruises and for calling her names, insulting and humiliating her. Mary would sometimes close herself to her mother in the toilet and scratch the wall with a pen about her unbearable life. Mary's childhood was just like that. Mary moved to the 7th grade and met a girl named Bella as her class was new. Bella was a pariah. No one was friends with her, and all her classmates shunned her. But Mary decided to go against everyone. The class hated both girls. The break at school was a nightmare. Mary and Bella were throwing dirty rags at coated clothes with chalk. Bullying of girls became permanent at school, and Mary switched to homeschooling. She graduated with difficulty. Mary got her first job at 17. She was washing dishes in the dining room. She became a kitchen worker 6 months later, and then she got a job as a cook. Mary had been working for 2 years in the cafeteria, where the men who liked her often went. She met Adam there. Mary fell in love quickly, and they moved in together. Adam often went away on business trips, and Mary was very painfully separated. Adam went away on another business trip, and Mary couldn't get through to Adam all day, and the next morning a woman answered her phone and told her that Adam was asleep. Mary hung up on her, at which point the whole world collapsed. Her tears rolled down her cheeks. She didn't understand why Adam did this to her because she loved him so much. They were married together. After a while, Mary forgot about Adam. She often walked along the waterfront alone and thought of life. Adam was waiting for her in a dark alley with a knife one night. He grabbed Mary from behind, hit the building hard, pulled out a knife, and stabbed her in the ribs. Mary was shaking with fear and horror. She could not yet understand that Adam was standing behind her. He turned her around after 2 minutes, and she was stunned. Adam was high. His eyes were angry, full of rage. He grabbed Mary's hand, but did not remove the knife. He dragged her down to the road, His car was there and ordered me to go with him. Adam brought her to the apartment. Then they spent the night together, and by the morning, Adam had fallen asleep and Mary had managed to escape. Mary avoided Adam and did not return his calls. She met another man in the dining room at the time, Jack. Jack came from out of town for work. They started seeing each other a lot. Jack would walk Mary home every night, and one night Adam was waiting for them outside the house. The men began to fight, and Mary ran home. Jack won the fight, and Adam left Mary alone. Jack asked Mary to marry them after 6 months, and she agreed. Their wedding was modest, with only relatives. Mary got pregnant 3 months later. Her pregnancy was difficult. She often lay in the hospital. Her child was born on time, but frail. He was often ill and developmentally challenging. The child became very sick when he was 1.5 years old. The doctors didn't think much of his illness. They said it was just a cough, prescribed him pills, and sent them home. The baby began to feel very bad. Mary called an ambulance 4 days later. The baby had a high fever. Unfortunately, the child died in the hospital 3 days later. It was pneumonia, which his weak body could not cope with. Mary had not spoken to anyone for 3 weeks. She prayed every day and cried, and Mary did not understand why her life punished her. Then Mary decided to divorce her husband 2 months later. She had no feelings for him. He came home one day not sober, and Mary decided to talk to him about the divorce. He beat her very badly that evening. Jack was kicking and punching her. Mary was drowning in tears, begging Jack to stop hitting her. His punch was powerful. Jack kneed Mary on the head. Mary passed out. Jack became sober the following day. He realized what he had done. Mary filed a police report on Jack at the time. Jack was called to the police, and after talking to the police, he returned home. Jack kneeling and begging Mary to withdraw the statement from the police. Mary was very angry with Jack, but agreed to start the application if they divorced quickly. Jack agreed. The property was sold, and the money was divided equally. Mary was trying to forget what had happened to her over the past few years. She called her friend Gwen, who had been friends for a long time, and Mary called her to meet her. Gwen was popular with men, so she had many friends. She brought Mary to her friends. There were many handsome, charming men, but Mary only noticed one. Michael turned out to be. He was tall, slim, and hilarious. He grew up in a good family. His father was a prosecutor. Michael went to police school, but never graduated from police school. He tried to work as a lawyer, but failed. He did not work permanently. They quickly hit it off. Michael went to work for a month. They called each other every day and got much closer. They started dating a month later. Michael was very romantic, sometimes gentle. He asked Mary to live together. She moved into his house. Everything changed at one point when his father died. Michael suddenly became very angry and cruel. His father gave him money and protected him from crime before, and everything changed at one point. Mary and Michael ran out of cash. Michael was left in debt, and Mary was threatened. Mary worked as a small store salesman then and had barely enough money to buy groceries and pay utility bills. Michael owed a lot of money, so they had to move to another town because they threatened his whole family. They moved to the big city, rented an apartment, and started a new life. Mary was trying to find a job, and Michael was pretending to look for a job. He wasn't going to work. Money started running out. Michael's mom sent them more money, but she said it was the last time. Soon, that money was running out. The rent had to be paid. Mary sold her computer out of despair. The money came from the sale. It was enough for a month. Mary was sitting by the window and didn't know what to do. There was no money left, no job, no rent. A fight arose amidst these problems between Michael and Mary ran into the bedroom and closed the door, and Michael was furious, and he broke down the bathroom door. He realized what he had done, told her to pack her things, and said they were leaving the next day. Michael called his friend, and he came to pick them up. Michael's friend took them to Michael's grandmother's. Mary got a job after 1 month, and she got a job at a small bakery. She worked every day because there was no money. Michael lay on the couch all day, and when his grandmother kicked him out of the house, he didn't come back sober and angry. Michael said a week later that he had found a job. The job was at the construction site. He left every day in the morning and returned in the evening. He promised that the money would be paid, but later, Michael didn't bring the money, even after 2 weeks. Mary had saved up money for that time to get a room. Michael took the money gladly and started looking for a place to live. They didn't move in. They kept living with Grandma. Mary started talking to Michael about renting. He seemed nervous, and she realized he was lying. He stole his grandmother's money, and it turns out he was drinking and living for a while. And then he started gambling and needed more money. Mary gave him the money to rent a place, and he lost it. Mary was desperate. She got involved with an alcoholic, gambler, and thief in the same person. Michael was proud and was not ashamed to tell everyone that his dad was a prosecutor. Everything was revealed, and then there was a terrible scandal. Michael grabbed Mary by the hair and began to beat her in front of his grandmother. Mary had endured everything. She had nowhere to go. Mary was almost broke, and home was a long way away. Grandma left after 1 month and left their things on the landing. They spent 3 days on their belongings at the entrance. Michael called his mother, who sent a car to pick them up. They came home. Mary got a job back at the store, and Michael took his time with work. He had spent his father's money before and didn't want to do anything. Michael started drinking a lot of alcohol from idleness. Life was unbearable for Mary. He caused her scandals at work and insulted and humiliated her. Mary called the police often. Michael avoided responsibility because he had many friends among the police. Mary tried to break up with Michael. He stalked her, threatened her, and beat her on the street. She was afraid to leave work sometimes to go home. Michael's mom told her she was sick of it. She blamed Mary for choosing Michael. Michael stopped drinking a month later, started acting normal, and they started dating again. Michael got a good job as a driver 4 months later. The business trip dragged on, he didn't pick up his phone all day, and the next morning a girl answered his phone and said that Michael didn't want to talk to Mary. The world collapsed for the second time. Mary didn't believe it was happening to her. The story repeated itself as with Adam. Mary was in utter despair. She didn't want to see anyone. She didn't talk to anyone. Mary shut down and became depressed. She couldn't survive the betrayal again because she forgave Michael so much, tolerated his abuse, and he did that to her. Mary saw only one way out. Mary met a lovely man named Tom on Tinder. He lived in a different city and invited Mary to come and meet him. Mary decided a month later. She took some things and visited Tom. The acquaintance was excellent. They spent a wonderful 3 weeks together, but had to return home. Tom only let Mary go on the condition that she return in 1 month and move in with him forever. Mary settled all her problems in 1 month, packed her things, and moved in with Tom. She wanted to leave all her memories of resentment at home and never think about them. After all, she was finally going to have a good life. Mary had moved in with Tom. A year had passed since then. Mary felt beautiful. No one had ever hurt her in that house. The nerves returned to normal. Mary became much calmer. The man was with Mary, who cared for her, not bullied her. Tom was a hard-working and responsible man. He never humiliated or betrayed Mary, so she loved and valued him so much. They often went for a walk in the woods. Mary remembered walking alone, and now her walks were always with Tom. He supported her always, even in the most foolish endeavors. Mary turned 30 today and became happy. She managed to forgive all those who hurt her. She was able to forget almost all the terrible things she did. She became much kinder to everyone and learned to trust people again. Life began with a new line. Now all the bad things are behind us.